Hello, it's Hill and Ponton back for another question and answer series. And you're lucky today because we have Kerry Baker with us. Hey, Kerry, how are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Good, good. Ready to answer some of these questions. And the first one that I see pop up is a really good one. It's one about Nexus statements. They want to know how often we see a Nexus statement from a doctor who hasn't physically examined the veteran when or work, but he's reviewed all the relevant documents. What would you say about that?
We see that all the time. A number of years ago, VA kind of went to a process called, what they call it, ACE. It stood for Acceptable Clinical Evidence, whatever that's worth. So the mindset was if there's acceptable clinical evidence in the claims file for a doctor to issue a medical opinion, then they can shorten the process and do that. Of course, we see very few favorable opinions come from those folks. VA likes to harp on us for getting outside examinations or not in-person exams, and then yet they turn around and do the exact same thing.
Exact same thing over the phone, not even a Zoom. One thing that we try to do is, because we work all over the country, a lot of times the doctors aren't present, but they do a Zoom conference where they can actually see the veteran. So I would say to this person, you should make sure that if you're not seeing the doctor in person, try to do a Zoom interview where the doctor can say they've looked at you, they've watched your cues, they've watched what's going on with you, and they feel like they have a very good impression of what your claim is and what they should be saying, because I think that helps a lot. The VA will just call up on the phone and ask questions, and they're okay with that. But when it comes to the veteran submitting evidence, they're much harder. So I would try to get a Zoom interview with that doctor and not just a phone interview if possible. Mm-hmm. Once again, Kerry, we're getting questions about permanent and total and what does that mean? The question being, I have a permanent and total rating. Is that able to be reduced or am I protected? You want to tell him the difference?
Yes. So permanent and total means basically you're getting benefits at the 100% rate or more. They are not going to call you in and re-examine you if you don't give them a reason. You asked about protected. Okay, permanent and total doesn't necessarily protect you from reduction. What does that is having a rating at the same level or higher for 20 consecutive years or more. Okay, 10 consecutive years protects the service connection, 20 years protects the rating. Now you can be permanent and total, only for 6 months. And you're not protected. You got a long way to go. But that doesn't mean you're subject for reduction. Odds are that's not going to happen if you don't give them reason to re-examine you. So if you're permanent and total and there's no chance of getting extra benefits like SMC, which is a whole animal in and of itself, I would say don't file any more claims. If you've got a disability that you think is underrated, say you got a back disability rated 10%, and you think it should be increased to say 40 or 50% permanent total, you got to ask yourself, is that going to do you any good? And if not, there's no benefit for filing a claim and giving them reason to re-examine you. And after you're for 20 years or more, you can go into them and say, hey, I feel completely better. None of my disabilities bother me anymore. It's a miracle. And they still can't take your benefits away once you reach the 20-year mark. So
important distinction, permanent and total does not mean they cannot take your benefits away. Protective does. 10 years that you've been service connected for a disability, it's protected. They can't take it away. 20 years, the rating, they can't take it away. But before that, permanent and total does not mean that they can't take it away. We have another question. When we had the NOVA seminar a couple of weeks ago, we were really looking forward to being updated on the backlog at the BVA, updated on what's going on at the regional office, and we didn't really get any of that. The chief judge did not come, so we have no idea what's going on with the BVA. the chief judge of the BVA. And always before, Tom Murphy, who was the acting head of benefits for the VA, would come and he would really tell us exactly where we were. He was only acting, he didn't want the job. So the person that they have appointed just got appointed. So really we didn't get any information because he didn't come. So that was really disappointing, because I did feel that every time Tom Murphy came, we had a real feel as to where they were, whether we liked it or not. Tom would tell us what was going on. So unfortunately, we didn't get any information. And this question is, welcome back. Is the VA doing anything on the backlog of cases? It says 155 days average time for cases. I've been preparing for a decision for 2 months. Well, those 155 days don't mean anything. We see them all the time. It's 155, that goes by, and then they add another 180 days to it or whatever. Unfortunately, nothing has happened to clear up this backlog that I know of. How about you, Kerry?
No, and it's getting worse for parts. It depends on if we're talking about the initial claims process. A lot of them do get decided much faster nowadays than it did, say, 6-7 years ago. And some do get decided within 120 days. A lot of them get decided within 6 months. But for example, if your claim has a records research component of it, all right, now this is a big pitfall here. An example of that would be blue water, right? If your ship was close to blue water, but it's not sure if it was in blue water, or they've got to research a combat stressor or something, all that used to be done by a DOD office called JESRIC, Joint Center for Research Unit Records. Well, that has now been closed, and VA has taken that office, that task on themselves. Okay, so VA now does all that records research. If your claim is in that stack, it's a long time. Unless it's expedited for some reason, I'm seeing about 2 years on average. That's the
or more.
Yeah, and that's the initial claim. Or it could be on remand or something if they fail to do that research prior. There's a problem with that. I don't want to take up the whole call explaining this. VA is including, like in the blue water research, if you have nautical service during the Vietnam era and you have a disability that's on the presumptive list for Agent Orange. Well, let's say you never left the East Coast of the United States, never went to Vietnam. Your case has nothing to do with Agent Orange. Your case is likely getting stuck in that same pile because the field is misinterpreting the central office's instructions on that. Very, very minute, almost indistinguishable little comment that they're all saying, oh, this means we have to do this research on everyone. Well, if you can imagine how many people served, maybe off the East Coast and never left the East Coast, went in med cruises or something like that, nowhere around Vietnam, but still have one of the disabilities and still served in that time frame. You got talking about a 10-year time frame. That could be a lot of cases, and those are all getting mixed in with the herbicide search and the combat stressor search, and VA knows about this problem now. Central office knows about it, and I have not seen them issue any guidance to fix it, and that just disappoints me to all hell. So excuse my French.
And this is on top of the huge backlog we had from COVID, because these facilities were shut down. No one did anything for almost 2 years. So they have the 2-year backlog plus this. It is very upsetting. I have a lot of veterans who are really angry and ask, why can't we do something to get this moving? I don't know. I suggest you contact your congressman. Like I said, you've got a voice and we can complain, but they don't listen to us. We've only got 1 vote each. You've got votes and you need to tell them. Go ahead.
I had a client die.
Yeah.
That was in that development bucket, and he was the perfect example. Never left the East Coast of the U.S. Did a couple of cruises up and down the East Coast for a few weeks at a time. Well, that gave him nautical service during the Vietnam War, and one of his claims was Parkinson's. So they lumped him in with that research, and I could not get the file out of it, even though I was telling them this is nothing to do with Vietnam. and they had a favorable opinion. Everything was ready to rate on this case, and they would not pull it out of there, and he died. Man, I was livid. It just that is not the
No.
way the VA should do business. So
No. Okay, we have, do you recommend 100% permanent and total veteran fight a denied secondary claim, blood pressure and sleep apnea for future DIC claim? Kerry?
I'm sorry, Kurt, could you read that one more time?
It says, hello, do you recommend 100% permanent and total veteran fight a denied secondary claim, blood pressure and sleep apnea for a possible, for their spouse, possibly in the future for a DIC claim?
It depends. It depends. One, you're already 100% permanent total. If you've got that for 10 years or more,
Right.
your spouse is going to get DIC even if you walk out in the road and get hit by a bus. Okay.
Right.
And so if that's the case, no, I would not recommend filing a claim just for DIC. The other thing you're going to want to look at is you're talking hypertension and sleep apnea. What's the likelihood that that's going to cause death over and above whatever the 100% is for, which it doesn't say what the 100% is for. So, if it's a combined rating of numerous disabilities, is it a single disability, say mental health or something? That's going to be a case-by-case call. Do you put yourself in jeopardy for trying to get the sleep apnea and the hypertension? Is there a mechanism to get it, either directly related to service or secondary to what you're already service connected for? Or are you going to outlive the VA with their 10-year rule and your spouse would get DIC anyway? If that's the case, definitely, I would say definitely don't, if that's the only reason you're doing it. So you're going to have to make a case-by-case call on that. But beyond, without knowing more facts, it'd be hard to answer that in more detail, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Next question, can a provider provide their own Nexus statement? I think the question is, if you have a treating doctor, can they provide a Nexus statement? Does that sound like what that question is to you, Kerry?
Probably, yes. I mean, if it's yes in both circumstances.
Oh, here it is. I'm sorry. I asked because my mother's ex-husband is a chiropractor and typed me a 27-page Nexus detailing everything he found. Yes, I would think you could use that.
Yeah, you can do that. You can, I mean, the rules even allow you, if you're a doctor or if you're some form of medical expert, I have seen, I would suggest doing this, but I have seen doctors write their own medical opinions.
Right.
And under the rules, they're a medical expert. Now, and there's a VA that likes to come out and say, well, you've got an interest in the outcome of your claim. Therefore, maybe your opinion's not that probative. Maybe it's biased. And, I can see that point. But at the same time, there's case law out there that says just because you have an interest in the outcome of the claim does not inherently make a statement less than credible. And you see that pulled out a lot when you might have a spouse that is an expert and the vet might not be, and the spouse is writing an opinion. So yeah, it's not across the board the same, but if you've got a relative that is willing to be objective and write an opinion, sure, just like Carol said, you can submit that.
Right, and I would. What is the easiest way to service connect high blood pressure if I'm already service connected for PTSD, TBI, sleep apnea, diabetes, fibromyalgia, and chronic fatigue? Kerry?
Well, going off the assumption that you've been out of service for a while, and the high blood pressure started long after service, if it started in service, you had blood pressure spikes in service, and maybe you were diagnosed high blood pressure shortly after service. We see that a lot. There's a possible nexus right there for the blood pressure having its onset during service. But from what you listed there, my gut tells me that you might have the easiest way and people might be surprised at this answer, linking it to sleep apnea.
That's what I was going to say.
Right, because sleep apnea, the problem with sleep apnea is not because you don't get enough rest. The long-term effects of sleep apnea are cardiovascular in nature. Your heart's working harder to get blood, to get oxygen because your lungs aren't pulling in as much. That increases blood pressure. And I've seen doctors write unsolicited VA opinions of all things, once in a million, where the doctor would look and say that the blood pressure likely started during service or was otherwise related to the sleep apnea, because you would see spikes in blood pressure initially while the veteran started snoring and all that. Apparently there's a relation there. So if you've got sleep apnea long term, especially if it went untreated, I'd probably start there if there's no other option with a good nexus statement. Kerry, what do you think?
I agree. I think that, I mean, you could always list all the others as a secondary cause of it, but I'm with Kerry. I think sleep apnea would be my primary one. So, the next question is from David. The VA is treating you, if the VA is treating you for a condition, but there's no diagnosis for the problem, how do you get them to put in the diagnosis?
Well,
Get another doctor?
Yeah, if you're a Gulf War veteran, I'd say, well,
Yeah.
if you don't have a diagnosis, that might play to your benefit if it's an undiagnosed illness. I mean, that's a tough question. If they literally don't know what's wrong with you, and they're still investigating that, maybe you should wait to file a claim until you know what's wrong with you. Unless you're, just out of the military or still in the military. Beyond that, are you sure they haven't diagnosed it? Have you got a copy of your records? And because sometimes doctors put a first impression down or something like that. They may or may not tell you, or they might put down, what they think it might be. I don't know. There could be a dozen different answers for that question. I think it just depends on the circumstances.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah.
But I always, like you said, Kerry, you should have read your medical records, and I'm assuming that this person did, and you should have given them a sufficient amount of time to send you out for testing or whatever else they would need to do a diagnosis. But if you've done all those things, I'm serious. I would find another doctor if your doctor has no idea, unless, as Kerry says, this is one of the Gulf War syndromes, and then that could help you with that claim. But you really need to be proactive. You need to figure out, what am I trying to achieve? And is this helping me, this doctor that's treating me?
Yeah, and in fact, real quick, let's just say that is a Gulf War claim. All right, so if that fits your situation, then you would want to file a claim for the symptoms that you're experiencing. All right, and be specific. Exactly. And tell VA, look, I went to the doc. They haven't given me a diagnosis. I don't know what this is, but here is what I'm suffering from. Okay, and so that when VA looks at the claim itself, they know what's going on. They know what rules to apply to it and all that. Because if you don't, they might look at it and go, well, that's a symptom. We can't grant service connection for a symptom. So in case that applies, take that advice.
It's good advice. This is a good question. How do I apply for permanent and total?
Well, technically, you apply like anything else. You file the right form and you tell them what you want. Probably a supplemental claim form on one like that. I think, depending on, if you've been 100% for 4 or 5 years and it's not permanent and total, you might actually have to do it on a 526, as crazy as that sounds. If you're up to speed on the forms and the history of the forms, that's crazy. If you know what's going on with AMA, you realize that, all right, that's what you have to do to file for an increased rating these days if you're not doing a supplemental review of a decision within the past year. And that's bitten a lot of us, in this business. So I might have gotten off track there.
But no, to get the VA to act, you've got to file a claim. You can't just write a letter and say, can I have permanent and total? They're not going to respond to that. And the two ways, as Kerry is saying, right now, if it's a new claim, is that permanent and total? I'm not really sure the way they're looking at it, but you would file a 526. That's a form number, VA 21/526. if they decide it's a supplemental claim, if they tell you that's not the right form, then you're back to the VA 210995, a supplemental claim. But you got to file one of those or you're not going to get any response. Go ahead.
Well, I'll say something to keep in mind, don't always be in that big of a rush to get permanent total. If you don't have it yet, if there's vital reasons you need it, okay, obviously that's fine. But if you just got 100% rating and they've got you set up for future exams just to see if it's going to stabilize, they're only typically going to re-examine you for maybe 3 to 5 years. And I'm not saying they'll do it every year in that time frame, but eventually they're going to stop re-examining you and make you permanent total.
Right.
If they're going to reduce you, they're probably going to do it during one of those exams. So if you're on you may be in a situation where you're not going to get reduced. Maybe you just no way your disability static. That P&T is going to come eventually. If you're on the fence and maybe you got a generous rating, you ask for that permanent total now. Maybe you got the rating just 6 months ago and you want that permanent total status real quick. You ask for it, they bring you back in for another exam. All right. So, you might be speeding up the inevitable depending on the facts of your case. But if you don't ask for it, you should eventually get it as a matter of standard course anyway.
So Kerry's saying you should have a copy of your claim file and a copy of that compensation and pension exam that awarded you those benefits. And if it's kind of iffy or not very strong, I certainly wouldn't ask to be reevaluated anytime soon, because the longer you stay at that rating, then the harder it is for the VA to reduce you.
Right.
So this, once again, it's like Kerry says, you need to know what's in your claim file.
That's a really good point. If you had it 5 years or more,
right,
it's going to be much harder for them to reduce you than it would be if you had it 5 years or less.
Okay. There's a question about how can you get us to review a claim. If you call our number 386-257-2100 and tell them you have a claim and you would like us to review that, then someone will be glad to contact you, take your information, and see if we can help you. John Bradley, could you describe how I could structure a sheltered work environment with a new employer? I am trying to understand how to comply with the provisions of TDIU, which is unemployability. Thanks. Kerry?
Let me read that again. I just scrolled and
He wants to know how to structure a sheltered work environment with a new employer so that he can comply with the unemployability provisions.
That's kind of an open question. One, are you getting TDIU now?
Yeah.
And are you trying to want to keep that TDIU by saying the new employment you have is sheltered? You're on a slippery slope if that's the case. If you are not getting TDIU and you're starting a new employment, and maybe you filed a claim for TDIU or have TDIU on appeal, that's a slippery slope too. It depends on what kind of job it is, what kind of concessions your employer gives you. If you get accommodations, are they reasonable accommodations? I'm going to be a little more conservative here than liberal and point out that, a lot of people in the federal government try to get TDIU because they get accommodations. And they say, well, I'm in a sheltered workshop. I wouldn't be able to be employed if I didn't get these accommodations. The question I have to ask is, are they reasonable accommodations? Because if they are, that means the government would give those same accommodations to anybody in your situation. So a reasonable accommodation might not be grounds for sheltered workshop TDIU claim. Not saying it's not all the time. We fight these, they're hard. I would rather see unreasonable accommodations. I would rather see accommodations where you're not going to get those same accommodations unless you have some form of special status. Employment for the blind is a good example of that. So I'm just, don't think it's that easy to do. You just go in there and structure a structured sheltered workshop and type of employment. There's a lot of ifs there. So
right.
Carol.
I think it's very rare that they will grant TDIU unemployability because of sheltered work. We ask for it, we try to get it a lot of times, but the VA is very hard on that. You can get it, but it is not easy at all. And I would hate to count on getting that because it's just not easy to get that. The VA thinks you're out there working most of the time, you know, you can work. That's as far as they're concerned. I know what the law says and I know what they're supposed to do, but that's not often what they do. William Best, I get blood pressure meds from the VA, but I want to know, can you get service rating for head trauma? I'm not sure whether you're saying the blood pressure causes the head trauma or the head trauma caused the blood pressure medications. I really need to know a little bit more from that, if you could let me know. This is from APK. How do I get insomnia connected with tinnitus? Just file a claim, I guess.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you say, Kerry?
Yeah, I mean, that would be a claim like any other secondary claim. It will be a tough claim just because, you know, what is insomnia? I mean, obviously, I know what it is, but it's hard to get insomnia as a standalone disability. I'm not saying it's not possible. I've seen it done, but I mean, there's no real rating criteria for just insomnia. You know, one way to do that's an extra scheduler rating. If you could get VA to do an extra scheduler review, if tinnitus is so bad that you just can't sleep because of it. You know, so that, I mean, that, but you would file the claim like any other. You would, I mean, to answer that question, yeah, you would. If you've never filed for it before, you need to do that on a 526. If you've been denied for it in the past, you need to do that on a 0995, and just state the claim as you would state any other, and what it's related to.
Right. And like Kerry said, if it's a new claim, you file a 526. If it's a claim you filed in the past, you file a supplemental claim. But I'm telling you, and I know Kerry feels the same, all of us feel the same way. We are constantly getting letters from the VA saying, you filed a 526, but you should have filed an 0995, a supplemental claim. Well, I don't think they're right, but rather than delaying the case, waiting to prove that we're right, just file the supplemental claim. So if they say, I don't want the supplemental, I want a 526, file it. It's not worth your time to fight these people about whether or not you filed the right claim. What you want to get is benefits. So I'm telling you, don't fight them on that. Just file whatever they ask for. One of the things that we try to do here is to educate you on things that have changed or that we are really worried that a lot of veterans don't know about. And I think the Blue Water veterans are one that just breaks my heart. These are the veterans who were not getting presumption of being in Vietnam, even though they had the presumptive type of disability. So these were the people that were on boats or ships or within 12 miles of the Vietnam coast. And they have been denied for years. Many of them have died. Many of them don't even know that they can file a claim. So Kerry has just done some awesome presentations. He gave a presentation on a number of things, but one of the things that I wanted him to talk to you today about was these Blue Water veterans. Kerry, if you would talk to us about that, with the important part that they need to know.
Sure. So if you are a qualified Blue Water veteran now, in other words, your ship was within the 12-mile limit, VA's conceded that, that makes you a Vietnam veteran, right? So even though we refer to it as a Blue Water veteran, that's the title of the law, the short title, if you will, that made all this possible. But in reality, you are now a Vietnam veteran, right? Just like, you know, so used to, we had boots on the ground, brown water, blue water. Now there's Vietnam veterans, period. If you're brown water, you're definitely within 12 miles because you're inside the boundaries of the land. So no distinction anymore. You're a Vietnam veteran or you're not.
Right.
So not getting into whether your ship crossed 12 miles or not, that's a different fight with some cases. The the big difference with y'all's claims and talking about herbicide related claims, okay, because that's what we see mostly, obviously, with Vietnam vets. You know, if before there was a blue water law, if VA added a new disability to the list of herbicide related disabilities, like, you know, like heart disease in 2010, like Parkinson-like syndromes here recently, bladder cancer here recently, hypothyroidism here recently, you know, those last three came online about the time the blue water stuff came online. And that's an interesting dichotomy, because taking away the blue water aspect for a minute, when they added the three new presumptions for Vietnam vets, VA had to re-adjudicate those cases that have been denied in the past under the NEMR rules. We could talk about NEMR for days, but understand it's basically a way to get an earlier effective date prior to the regulation for the particular disability that you're seeking. As long as, one, you have the disability prior to the regulation and you have filed or been denied a NEMR claim, because I say that in air quotes because there's a few definitions of what a NEMR claim is. And
Kerry, why don't we give them a fact situation? A veteran in 2008 filed a claim for heart disease and ischemic heart disease, and he was denied. He was a blue water veteran, and he has died. Where's the claim now? He never appealed it. So does he have a claim, and who has a claim?
Okay, so yes, he has a claim. He's an NEMR class member now. If he filed it in 2008, that's 2 years prior to the heart disease regulation coming into effect. So under the blue water stuff, he then becomes a NEMR class member because he's now a Vietnam veteran. So that's where you're going to have the blue water stuff and the NEMR stuff meet head to head. And that's why.
But he's dead, Kerry.
Huh?
He's dead. He didn't appeal it. So where's his claim?
True. And that's because under NEMR, and this is not specific to blue water, because you kind of have to understand NEMR a little bit to understand how blue water affects it. Under NEMR, a class member, a NEMR class member is the veteran's spouse, child, or parent, okay, in that order. Those are all class members. If you're a class member, you by right have a right to have that claim re-adjudicated. If you're the spouse or the child or the parent, if you know, in that order, if there's, in other words, if the spouse is divorced, the spouse still gets paid. I mean, hold on, this veteran passed away. So in this scenario, yeah, you would
say he died in 2009 and left a widow.
Yeah. So he left a widow.
She's still alive.
There's a few different scenarios when there's a divorce in play. So forget I said that. She's still alive. Then she can come in now and file a claim to get benefits back to 2008 up to the point where he passed away, and then DIC benefits after that if it's applicable. If he was a Vietnam veteran prior to blue water, VA would have been on the hook to search those claims out, the people that have been denied in the past, and re-adjudicate those cases on their own. In other words, the claimant, the vet, the spouse, the child, nobody had to come in and file that claim. VA is supposed to find them, all right, and re-adjudicate them and let those people know, hey, we're re-adjudicating your claim here. You might get some benefits. The blue water, being Vietnam veterans, now qualify for NEMR, even though blue water rules have some of their own little quirks in there on effective dates. The big difference is that VA asked and Congress gave it to them, where they don't have to go out and seek claimants that have been denied in the past if they're blue water vets. Okay, so unlike your typical NEMR case where they're seeking you out because they denied your claim in the past, they're going to come back and re-adjudicate it. If they grant it, it might go many years back. They're not going to do that for blue water vets. The blue water vets have to come in and file a claim. right, and file a claim for an earlier effective date. The rule still applies after that. They should get that effective date, but you got to ask for it. Whereas in true NEMR readjudications, you don't have to ask for it. There's another difference with blue water, and this is specific to blue water. You're not going to get this in NEMR. If the case that Carol gave an example of was a Vietnam veteran, not blue water, all right, take blue water out for a second. Trying to think how I'm trying to explain this. And she filed, the vet had filed that claim in 2008. 2008 is prior to the regulation going into effect in 2010. So under NEMA,
prior to the VA giving a presumptive
right,
disability for heart.
So that case, under the old rules, the vet would get the service connection from 2008, or the widow would get the accrued from 2008. But if that same vet filed a claim in 2012, 2 years after NEMA the regulations went into effect adding heart disease, it's not NEMA. Even if it was denied wrongfully, and the vet files again 2 or 3 years later, he's not going to get that earlier effective date because the original claim came in after the rule was published. Anything after the rule published is not NEMA.
So Kerry, this is even the blue water veterans who at that time could not have gotten approval.
Here's the rub. Unless you're blue water, because the rules for the blue water, Congress wrote in the statute that if a claim had been previously denied, the veteran files a claim and asks for that to get his original service connection, he will still get it, even if the original claim in that scenario was in 2012 after the NEMA regulations went into effect. Okay, that's specific to blue water. That means even if your claim was denied after the VA made that disability presumptive, which would normally rule it out for NEMA,
right?
It's not ruled out under blue water. Okay, that's a big bonus there, because you're talking about all herbicide-related disabilities, not just the ones that were recently made presumptive, because NEMA is just going to apply to the new ones, and then they're going to re-adjudicate those new ones. They're not going to re-adjudicate them on their own for blue water vets. The blue water vet has to come in and file, but the NEMA restrictions on effective dates, the restriction being it has to have happened after the regulation, that does not apply to blue water vets. So the blue water vets get the benefit of any time from September 25th, 1985, which is when NEMA starts, up to the day they file the claim if they've been denied in the past, whether could be months or years past the presumptive date. I hope that makes sense. I know it's hard to follow, but basically, if you're a blue water vet and you've been denied a herbicide-related disability in the past, or you're surviving, your spouse who's passed away was the same way, and you're the surviving spouse, you can most likely get benefits under that circumstance for blue water vets, even if you couldn't do it under NEMA. But there's going to be other times when both the blue water stuff and the NEMA rules kind of come together to make the claim even better. So just keep that in mind. I would say don't try to figure it all out yourself. It's complicated.
It is very complicated. And what really breaks my heart is these benefits would either go to a veteran who is very ill, or a veteran who has died and left a spouse or children. And unfortunately, it's my experience that often military spouses, especially women, are not left in a very good situation. A veteran, they need these benefits, and they don't even know that they're entitled to these benefits. The children don't know that they're entitled to these benefits. And that's why we are trying to get the word out that if you know anybody, or you are somebody who was in this class of people who actually were within 12 miles of the shore of Vietnam, and they haven't been getting any of these benefits, they really need to file for these benefits. This is an incredible amount of money that these people could get, benefits that they probably desperately need. So we're asking you to think, if you know of anybody, people who've died, people who have left widows or children, let them know that they need to file for these claims. The VA, as Kerry told you, is not going to come out looking for you. They're not going to tell you you're entitled to these. Unfortunately, this is so complicated that a lot of people who, service reps and people who help you, a lot of our attorneys, it has taken a long time to try to figure out exactly how all this works. So you can't rely on someone telling these people. You need to tell them. You need to spread the word. Go ahead,
Yeah.
Kerry.
Well, and it's like an example of, if I can kind of paint an example of something that you would not normally ever think of, okay, and how it could benefit someone. Say say the vet died 10 years ago, okay, and his surviving spouse died 5 years ago, and there's a grown child that that's in their 40s or 50s,
Not disabled, just a regular.
right, just a normal grown adult child who would never qualify for benefits in their own right.
Right. So normally adult children who were not disabled before 18 do not qualify for dependent benefits, but this is the exception. Go ahead, Kerry.
So let's say this vet tried to get service connected for ischemic heart disease for 20 years prior to his death. Okay. And I'm bringing up ischemic heart disease because it's been on the book since 2010. People have been getting it since well before 2010. VA is good at denying those claims when it's not ischemic heart disease. Okay. There's a number of heart conditions out there that's fatal that aren't ischemic in nature. A good example is non-ischemic cardiomyopathy, or basically congestive heart failure, chronic congestive heart failure that's caused by something like runaway electrical system in the heart, or blood pressure, or something like that. That's not caused by blockages or anything like that. So first, chronic congestive heart failure warrants 100% rating, okay, by VA. Say this vet fought that for a number of years, and they just kept saying, once the law did pass that might have provided him benefits, they said, no, your case is not ischemic in nature, so we still have to deny you benefits. Well, let's say that same person, right, had hypothyroidism, not even on VA's radar back in 2010, right? And say that hypothyroidism was untreated, and it was the cause of that non-ischemic cardiomyopathy that killed the veteran, 10 years ago, that he had fought for 20 years to get that. That grown child can now come in because that's a new disability added here recently that falls under NEMR. Okay, if you're the blue water vet, that's going to qualify too now. That grown son could come in and file a claim and potentially get, 20 years worth of benefits that vet fought for while he was alive. And if you got 20 years worth of benefits at 100% rate because you had a congestive heart failure, you're not going to be an enemy of VA anymore. You're going to become your friend real quick. So now you're not going to get DIC because you're a grown child or something like that. But point being, there's a lot of benefits. I've seen widows and grown children in NEMR cases get mailed, $600,000 checks at once. They didn't know it was coming. So that's a good day.
And that's what we're trying to tell you. This is not a small amount of money. This is a lot of money that a lot of people don't even know they're entitled to, and many of them really need this money. So this is an amazing new law. It can really help. New law in accepting the blue water veterans as regular Vietnam veterans and what that can do for them and their family. And remember, this is so different that most people don't understand it. Remember, you normally, an adult child cannot get benefits. They are not dependents unless they became disabled before age 18. So this is unusual. Many people do not understand how this works, and they're telling people they're not entitled. They're discouraging them from filing claims. You need to spread the word, or if you are in this class, you need to file a claim. It's an amazing, wonderful benefit for these veterans. Kerry worked really hard to get a lot of these veterans for them, and I really appreciate your work.
Well,
And
thank
now
you.
Kerry is explaining it to everybody that doesn't understand how it works.
And you don't want to, you want to, well, you want to take VA's response. So you're out there on your own and you try this. You want to take VA's response with a really big grain of salt, maybe a salt block. Because most, in fact, VA employees don't understand this either. VA, after the big re-adjudication in 2010, they began yet again under training, in my opinion, their staff for this. They've contracted out, of all things to contract out, initial NEMA reviews, which is just a bad idea, but that's so be it. So you might file a claim like that, especially if you're the grown child or the parent, and VA is going to look at you like a deer in the headlights and what, you don't qualify for this, because they might legitimately think you don't.
And I'm afraid they do legitimately think you don't. A lot. They don't understand the law, and that's
Right.
what we're trying to say.
Yeah, so don't take their no as the word of God. Make sure you speak to someone that knows this business and can look at that and help you out. Don't think they all know what they're doing here.
Thanks, Kerry. I know that we took a lot of time up, and we're going to try to answer some more questions, but sometimes there's such big changes in law, and they can benefit so many people that we want to get the word out there. And we're hoping that you'll help us spread that around. Linda Love, will a supplemental claim for sleep apnea and headaches as secondary to my depression and anxiety for back pay put my 100% PTSD for depression and anxiety in jeopardy of being reviewed?
You want sleep apnea and hypertension secondary to? Is that what it says?
It says a supplemental claim for both sleep apnea and headaches secondary to depression and anxiety, trying to get back pay. I think that's what she's getting. Put her 100% for depression and anxiety in jeopardy of being reviewed.
It shouldn't. Headaches and sleep apnea are, you typically wouldn't see VA schedule a mental health exam to determine whether the sleep apnea and hypertension was related to a mental health disease.
Agreed.
Normally that's going to be either a general practitioner or a neurologist or something like that. I see no reason where they should schedule you for a mental health exam in that situation. And if they don't schedule you for a mental health exam and you're getting 100% for mental health, then they're not going to look at that issue. All right. If they scheduled you for a mental health exam, if you worded your claim in a way that they took it as an increased rating for the mental health, even though you're 100%, they would still likely schedule you for an exam. Because that's your claim you're filing, not VA coming in to re-examine you. If that were to happen, what I would do at that point is send a letter to VA immediately saying, I cancel my claim regarding mental health. There's no need to examine me. I say that with a grain of salt because if you do that at VA's request, they're going to reduce your benefits because they tried to examine you. You didn't show up for the exam. The exam was at their request. They were doing a review every 2 or 3 years, whatever. If the claim is at your request, right, and you don't show up for an exam, the rule is you deny that claim, but you don't disturb the running benefits that are there. Big distinction, very important distinction. So if you file that claim and they set you up for a medical exam and an opinion for the sleep apnea and the blood pressure, fine, go for it. If they inadvertently try to examine your mental health and you don't want that to happen, you can cancel that. It's your claim. it should not result in any kind of damage to your claim if you cancel your own claim. So does that make sense, Carol?
Yes. Next question, Jacques. When is the best time to turn in a headache log? I think if I had a headache claim, I would keep an ongoing log. Now, sometimes I make my clients keep 3 months, but I would keep one and turn one every month in. I think the better you represent your claim, the better off you'll be. This I don't know the answer to. Efrain may know. Can I still sign up for CPAP recall registration on your website? I don't see the label across the top of the webpage anymore. So Efrain, if you could post something that will tell them those answers, I would appreciate that. This is about TM fiduciary, Kerry. Sold my house, can't get the $100,000 I used to pay my mortgage, or the $500 I used to pay my mortgage, not authorized. Is it just sitting in the bank? The problem with the fiduciaries, I understand, Kerry, is they're not really regulated by the VA. And it's often difficult to get them to act.
Well, what was the name of the person? I'm trying to find that question.
It says TM fiduciaries. It doesn't have a name on there. It's right after, can I sign up for the CPAP recall? So it's a blue circle with a white T in it, TM fiduciary.
Blue circle. See it in the middle? Is it near the end?
It's near the top. We didn't get that far. I guess TM is the name, and it says fiduciary, sold my house, can't get the $500 I used to pay for my mortgage, not authorized. It's just sitting in the bank.
Okay, if I understand the question right, and I might not, so I apologize. If you have a fiduciary, if VA has found you not competent to handle your own financial affairs, so let's say I'm assuming that's the case, and you have a house that you're selling, and I'm not sure how all this is playing in together. If you have a house that you're selling, but you can't get $500
As he sold.
that's sold.
Uh-huh. I think you're going to have to give us a little more information, because I'm not sure either. Okay.
I mean, I know this, if you have a fiduciary and you have a bill, like a mortgage that has to be paid and it's not getting paid, you really need to speak to that fiduciary, whoever it is. And if it's a VA appointed fiduciary, you really need to speak to them. And if they're not paying your bills, you need to let somebody in the regional office know that handles the fiduciary side of the house, that your fiduciary is not paying your bills, because they are responsible for doing that.
Right.
And there are other parts of that question I would probably be reading too much into to try to answer, but anything like that, you're going to have to include your fiduciary if you've been appointed one. And if they're not cooperating with you, you need to get a hold of VA.
VA, and this is another time I would contact my congressmen and my senators, because sometimes they can help with this.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times the VA will say, well, I don't really handle this. There's the fiduciaries, they handle it, another section. I've had trouble with that. Okay, Vincent Venezuela, I was discharged for being overweight. Can I use that directly for my secondaries, or still have to use it as an intermediary from service-connected conditions? Kerry, do you think he can use that directly?
I would not want to try it directly. I would want to use it as an intermediary. That's what the law allows right now. I don't know of a rule that allows you to use it as a primary, even though it might have started in the service. I would take the safer route and use it as an intermediary in order to get something else service connected. But if you're asking if they're going to service connect, let's say obesity, I don't think they will, even if it started in the service. Maybe there'll come a day that that'll happen, but no, not right now.
Yeah, I don't see that either. Larry Diaz not doing so well. I am sorry to hear that. This is from Inclusion. Kerry, should I include elements of my secondary condition with my initial claim?
Yes, yes. So look, if you're filing a claim, say for the first time, and you know the main thing that you're filing for has caused 5 other things, right? File for those 5 other things when you file for the main thing. Don't piecemeal your claim together. I cannot stress that enough. This process is complicated enough with the advent of AMA. It's far more complicated. You're going to get far more decisions in a shorter period of time, and no, you just don't want to get me started on that. The better, the more you can keep all your issues together, the better for you, the easier it is to follow for a VA employee, the easier it is to follow for a representative. Carol and we're pretty good at what we do, and there's not many situations that I can't look into a file and figure out. But man, these AMA things even kick our butt. It just, you can't look at it and decide in 5 minutes what's wrong. You might have to trace back 10 different decisions. So when you're filing multiple claims at multiple times, it's going to compound that problem. File everything at once.
Amen. Eric, I'm a former paratrooper and I have lower back issues and radiculopathy. The VA has actually, and the military have done studies on the injuries that they presume will happen with paratroopers. You probably have a very good claim. The VA will probably deny you, but don't continue those claims because those are very winnable claims, and you should push all of the injuries you've had because of being a paratrooper. Rodney Brown, I think I qualify for SMC R1. How do I get this started? I think you need to give us a little more information, don't you, Kerry? Because
absolutely, I have a lot of, I'd say in the past year, we've seen a lot of claims come to us, and a vet wanting SMCT.
Yes.
For traumatic brain injury. And they might be 100%, and they might be severely disabled. That does not mean they're going to qualify for SMCT. So let's say they've filed a claim for aid and attendance and that was denied, right? You're not going to get SMCT, which is paid at the highest level of aid and attendance, if you can't qualify for regular aid and attendance.
Right.
Okay, same thing here, sort of with R1. You think you qualify for R1, and you might, right? It's hard to get. So here's the quickest way to get to R1. My apologies up front. 2 rates of SMC between L and O with nothing counted twice. Between L and N with nothing counted twice would get you to O. If you're at O and you need A&A, you go to R1. Now that's a short way to say something very complicated, but what you need to pick up from there is you need 2 rates of SMC between L and N to get to O. You can't use anything twice. That's the important thing, what I said there. Here's an example. Loss of use of both legs below the knee will get you L, 1 L. Okay, so you can see where I'm going with this. You need 2 of those or higher just to get to O, and you must, once you get to O, you must require the need for aid and attendance. Now the A&A could have got you, could be one of those L's, okay, but you can't use the same thing twice. So if you need A&A because you lost both legs, well, they're going to pay you the SMC for losing both legs. They're not going to pay you a separate A&A for losing both legs. Okay, so if the legs is what causes the need for A&A, you can't get it twice. Okay, take the SMC for the loss of use. Okay, you're going to need another L through N to get to O. All right. So if you're 100% for a heart condition, let's say on top of the loss of both legs, and that heart condition is so bad that you need aid and attendance because of it. Now we're talking METs definitely of 1 to 3. 1 to 3 has been likened to eating. You get winded by eating. So that might not even get you A&A. Okay. If you got 100% heart condition and it's at its very end, you probably could, but there's no guarantee of that. Maybe you have loss of use of both hands and loss of use of both feet. There's two rates between L and N that would get you to O. Odds are you can't use your hands and or your feet, probably need aid and attendance. That would get you to R1. So we're talking serious disabilities that are not going to be met lightly. And if you've got to combine a bunch to try to get A&A, okay, and we see this all the time. We have people with a long list of disabilities, very severely disabled. Maybe they have one or two loss of uses or amputations, but not a lot. I say a lot, I mean, two's a lot, obviously. They still have trouble getting up that high. So just take that with a grain of salt. So yes, you might be entitled to that, but you might not. Obviously, there's no specifics in that question. So,
and that's what Kerry's trying to say is SMC is so difficult, and getting the higher ratings R1, R2, SMCT are unbelievably difficult. And as he's trying to tell you, as you can see, what's L, what's O, how do you get to P? All of these are really, really difficult first to figure out and then to actually get them. So that question, how do I get to R1? We could talk all day long and still not get to your answer. I had surgeries done twice for hemorrhoids with the VA and still got denied monetary compensation. Is it best to get a lawyer? Now, remember, the VA is going to look at how you are after the surgeries before they give you a rating. And if you're fine after the surgeries, you're probably not going to get any money. Hemorrhoids don't seem to get people very much in the way of ratings, I found, Kerry. I find that, it's a lot of times you spend a lot of time getting nothing.
Yeah, I've seen some decent ratings with hemorrhoids. They're very rare. They're not as difficult to treat as they once were, I think. But yeah, that's hard to get a high rating for those.
Right. Okay, we're going to have to wrap it up. I did want to. There's one that says, if the VA denies me my claim for high blood pressure without giving me an exam, can I request one now and submit a CMP exam as new evidence on appeal? Kerry, what do you think? I think.
Well, I think you have, if I understand the question, so you filed a claim for high blood pressure, they denied the claim outright, did not give you an exam. Going on the assumption that you're within a year of that decision, yeah, you could do two things, one of two things. You could file a request for a higher level review. You could ask for a conference. The DRO is going to call you up or your rep up. Say, look, I filed this claim. Here's why I should have been examined. VA did not examine me. That's a duty to assist era, and odds are you might be able to convince that DRO to send the case back to the supplemental claim lane for them to do an examination. The other thing you could do is just what you said, file a supplemental claim with your own examination that would be new and relevant evidence. With no guarantee the first line rater is going to see it as new and relevant evidence, even though it clearly would be. And you might get the exam that way. So I think in that scenario, you probably half a dozen one, six of the other. And if you go the first route of getting a higher level review and that doesn't get you anywhere, you can then still come back in the supplemental claim lane and follow your original plan there. So those are your two options, basically.
Perfect. And I'm with Kerry. I would do his first duty to assist, failure of a duty to assist. And if that doesn't work, then you can do the supplemental claim. Mm-hmm. Last question, because I think this comes down from Eric from before. I'm a former paratrooper and have lower back problems. I was denied going to the BVA. I never complained in service, but I've been seeing a chiropractor since I left. So it really doesn't, it makes it harder that you didn't complain in service, but it doesn't make your case impossible. if you're at the BVA, you need to make sure you have the right evidence, because if you don't, you're going to be denied, and that's a denial you really don't want to get. So I would make sure that I have a doctor, I have statements, maybe from buddies that saw you get injured, statements from people who knew you before and after service to say how you were damaged in service. And then you definitely need a nexus letter. You need a letter from a doctor saying, because of what happened in service, it's as likely as not that I've ended up with this disability. This is all we have for today. Thank you, Kerry. It's awesome as always to be with you, and I hope you'll have a great week.